Welcome to NCC Unplugged, the podcast from Norwin Christian Church where conversations, community, and culture converge.
Alrighty. Welcome to another episode. This is a rousing introduction, everybody. And to my left, your right, is Matt Mastroianni.
Hello.
To my other right, your left. No, it's not my other. I only have one of them. I have one right. Is Garrett Crawford.
Garrett's over there.
Yeah. Yep, you're Garrett. And today we're going to talk a little bit about...
Well, you didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, and my name is Jeff Terpstra.
To your
and
center.
I'm not to my I'm not to the left or the right. I am who I am. Thank you very much. Thanks for introducing me, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today we are going to have a rousing discussion on Christian higher education, which people may have just clicked off. I don't know.
I was going to say the introduction was probably going to be a lot more,
You had to draw people in.
Yeah.
I had to do something to get us there. But you know what? This is what I like about podcasts. Some people are like, not for me. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Others are like, what is Christian higher education? What does it have to do with church? What, so they maybe are still listening.
Yeah.
So
and others are like, I've been waiting for this episode.
Yeah.
What took you so long?
Yeah. So thank you,
Here we are.
5 people. Which right before we started, I was kind of talking like there's different levels of education in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a little bit longer than maybe it should have. Matt, you were talking about you have an associate's degree, not a ministry degree, but still.
Yeah.
So counts.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Thanks. Yes.
Like I wasn't God's calling on your life.
Right.
For me, I have an undergrad degree from Florida Christian College. Doesn't exist anymore.
The degree or the college?
The college.
Okay. All right. The degree still
I don't know if the degree counts or not. If it matters, it does in my heart. And then I got a master's degree from another university that no longer exists. So,
the seminary does.
That's true. Okay. No, you're right. So the seminary was moved to a different location, different college, and that was Lincoln Christian University.
Now it's taken over by Ozark, which is better anyway.
It's taken over by Ozark, but it's still called Lincoln.
Yeah, what did they change the name? Is it just Lincoln Seminary?
I think it's Lincoln Seminary at Ozark, something like that. So, but we're actually going to highlight a little bit on Garrett's degree because Garrett is still kind of in the throes of it. And it's a little bit foreign to me too because I haven't gone that far to get a doctoral degree. And Garrett's leaving NCC, so we're not going to have to call him doctor.
Oh, thank you.
Which I was never looking
That was
forward
going to
to.
be weird. Yeah. Go straight to his head.
It wouldn't fit on his business card anyways, and on the church letterhead. So we weren't going to go there. But so Garrett, tell us a little bit. What is it like? So even like master's work, it's maybe kind of some of the typical classroom work of a college, all that kind of stuff. But then you get to doctoral work and it's a little bit different because you have this thesis you're proposing, all this stuff. So tell us a little bit about why you pursued it.
Yeah. Well, fun fact, in America,
Okay.
in America, your doctoral work is a dissertation, not a thesis. Thesis. In Europe, your doctoral work's a thesis, and your master's work's a dissertation.
I had no idea.
So it's,
That was fun.
Yeah, there you go. That's a fun fact.
You're one of the few people that would call that a fun fact.
Yeah.
So we are in America. So
I'm what's called ABD, all but dissertation, in my doctoral work, my PhD work.
Okay, so you're doing a dissertation. What is your dissertation on?
So
in terms that we the general population would understand.
It's on exploring the relationship between determinism and free will through the analogy of classical and quantum mechanics.
Okay. So for those that don't know, when you are doing work like this, it needs to be new work, right?
Yes. So I'm contributing to a specific field.
Yes.
So and then I have to defend my contribution before I get accepted as a doctor.
Right.
So right now I'm I'm 3 chapters in of the 8 that I have to write. So when I'm finished, I'll have about 300 pages of research work on this topic.
Yeah.
And then I will defend it against with a panel of peers who are in the theological doctors. And then if they feel that I've adequately defended my contribution, and then I'll get a doctorate.
Yeah. So let's break this down a little bit more so people understand. So I understand. So you're making a new contribution to this theological field. Mm-hmm. The theological field, would that be the first part of that title?
Okay.
Of like determinism versus free will?
Yeah. So my master's is in just a master's of arts in theology. So it's broad. Mm-hmm. And then like as you go forward, you're getting more and more narrow. So like my undergraduate, Bible theology, preaching church leadership, master's in just theology, doctorate in theological studies, dissertation in systematic theology.
Systematic theology.
So technically I would be classified as a systematic theologian, but my focus in theological systems would be on the nature and character of God, in his relationship with humanity. And so like I'm exploring God's sovereignty, human liberty, and how we can explain that relationship through the observation of what's like basically physics. Classical mechanics would be like Newtonian physics, where it's all about gravity, and we can observe gravity. You know, the popular story about Isaac Newton was an apple fell on his head and he realized there was gravity. So like classical mechanics is all about things you can observe. And so like Einstein famously said, God doesn't play dice with the universe, meaning anything that goes on in the universe is quantifiable. It's not by sheer chance.
Okay.
But on the flip side of that, around the same time that Einstein coined that phrase, he coined it because there was a new type of physics coming out called quantum mechanics, quantum physics, which basically says there is a whole field that's atoms, like quarks, atom particles.
Adam Wilson.
Yeah, we know. I know a couple. There's
a few
things
atoms
you
here.
can't see and quantify. They happen, and I'm not going to go too deep into this. It's so much fun, but I'm not going to.
Fun fact.
There's different tests that they've done to try to observe quantum mechanics, and what they observe is that it's indeterminable. Like the best example is they shot. You can shoot photons at a metal sheet, and you can put 2 slits in this sheet, and the photons. Theoretically, you should be able to determine which slit the photons will go through. But what happens is photons will either go through the slit you're not expecting it to go through, or they'll go through both slits at the same time, or it'll just pass right through the metal sheet. Like you can't determine at a quantum level what's going to take place. And so scientists will say, well, we have to have quantum mechanics because that's how we navigate and understand the cosmos. But there's something going on at an atomic level as well. And so both determinism and indeterminism exist. And I'm trying to use that analogy and that relationship to show how God determines all things and he's sovereign over all things. He governs all things. And yet we also have a freedom of choice and will.
I that last part
Following
I
a little bit now?
Yeah.
So there's things we definitely understand, gravity.
Yeah.
There's things we think we understand, but we don't. Quantum mechanics, essentially.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm thinking like Ant-Man from the Marvel universe, like going into the quantum realm and all of that.
That is
So it's more.
Accurately inaccurate.
Yes, I'll take it.
I was going to say, is there a chance of that happening? Like,
I don't know. I'm not a physicist. I'm just.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
I'm a philosopher of physics more than I am a physicist.
Okay.
so oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So bringing that into theology, that there's things that are determined, right? God has his will. God has created the universe. He's created these systems, but yet there's an element of free will that he allows us to have as we live our lives.
How do these things coexist?
How do these things coexist? And then seeing that image play out even in nature with those two things.
And I should clarify, like, systematic theology isn't about the systems that God makes. Systematic theology is about finding a starting point, and from that starting point, developing your theology.
Gotcha.
So, like, one of the most famous systematic theologians his name's Wayne Grudem, and his starting point is.
I'm excited because I have one book of his.
Probably
I recognize
the famous book.
You're almost a doctor, Jeff.
Probably.
You're almost a doctor now, Jeff.
So he's like probably one for like the average Christian. His book is very easy to read, and so a lot of people buy his book, Systematic Theology. I have a copy of it too,
Which is why Jeff has it.
But he starts with revelation, with not the book of Revelation, divine revelation, how God reveals himself to creation. But not all systematic theologians start with revelation. Some start with scripture. Some start with Christology. Some start with theology proper. My favorite systematic theologian, kind of the father, is Thomas Aquinas. He starts with theology proper. And so how you start determines the next step, which is what's called orienting questions. What question from your starting point do you have that leads you to your next question, to your next question, to your next question? Okay. And so each question leads to a conclusion, which leads to another question. So that's systematic theology. And my question is, my starting point is just theology proper. And my question is, can God's sovereignty coexist with human agency? And then I'm using this analogy to make my argument or to, study to determine what my conclusion is going to be.
So what interests me, because like thinking these things, and even my experience in master level classes and with professors, like I always knew this was beyond me. It was like, I just wasn't made for this. My mind wasn't going there. I did a lot of classes remotely, and that's hard too. Is like learning Greek from your living room. You're like, this is so difficult. And maybe you guys hearing Garrett, it's like, this is just a different level. Like, it's beyond me. Like Garrett has previously talked about, like, you got to learn Latin, because you're researching all these books that haven't been translated. And so you need to learn Latin, and that's something that they look at and all these different things. But all of it boils down to some questions that everybody has asked. And you've gotten these questions, like questions of like, but if God knows everything, then why is he allowing this evil stuff to happen?
Yeah.
Or like, okay, but if God has something for me in my life, then am I really choosing it? Like, has everything been chosen for me already? So it's not this academic world that has no meaning for today on our lives. Like, but you're bringing it to that different level because we're trying to understand a God that's even beyond that. We're trying to rise to this understanding of a perfect mind and a perfect creator. And we'll never fully get there as humans, but that doesn't mean we don't try and strive for some of these things. And some of us will never get there, and that's fine. But the work that Garrett and others are doing, like, so I guess maybe move to the next point of this conversation of like, okay, Garrett, you're in the trenches of ministry every day, but you're also, you said like on the 3rd chapter of 8 chapters. So how have you seen the work that you're doing impact everyday ministry and answer some of those questions that people are asking?
Well, because I study it a lot more, I'm more prepared, and I think I wouldn't have this topic has been something I've always been interested in because we oversimplify this topic by saying it's Calvinism versus Arminianism. And so when I remember being in like undergraduate work and like having these debates with people about who's right, Calvin or Arminius, and then I study it myself and I'm like, well, really, they're kind of the same. Like Arminius was probably closer to John Calvin than John Calvin's followers were. There's some history to it and there's some differences for sure. But if we don't really dive into this, we can't fully understand the breadth of the historical debate. And we then just minimize it all down to this guy versus this guy. And it's not really an accurate summation of it. But I find all the time, especially people in my generation, ask these sorts of deeper questions. And there's a lot of statistics that are showing that like the next generation, Gen Z, that's coming into adulthood now, a lot of them they refer to themselves as interested in spiritual things or spiritual people, but not necessarily Christians. They're growing what's called the demographic of nones, NONES, of people that don't affiliate with anything. They're not atheist, they're not agnostic, they're not Christian, they're not any other religion. They just want to know things. And so they ask a lot of really good, deep questions. And we see that like in our youth group, whenever I've taught like a middle school or high school class, they're just filled with questions.
Cool.
Good, great questions. And I think my training has allowed me to think deeply about these questions preemptively so that I'm ready to give an answer when they come. And yeah, I mean, at the church level, no one really needs to know the relationship of quantum and classical mechanics. But because of the topic, like my first chapter was on the historical debate on determinism and free will. So I had to look at Louis de Molina, Thomas Aquinas, Jacob Arminius, John Calvin, and look at all these things that they originally wrote that have followers for what they have written. And now I can be more prepared to give an answer to these questions without even having to go into like my analogy for what I think is right. But yeah.
So being 3 of 8 chapters in, have you gone into any of this work with a preconceived notion that through your examination and study kind of changed your mind, or you learned something different than you thought?
So there's definitely a lot that I've learned. Originally I was hoping to just go, I would classify myself as what's called a compatibilist. So you're either a compatibilist or an incompatibilist. You either think free will is compatible with determinism, or you think it's incompatible with determinism. If you think it's compatible with determinism, then you're either going to be what's called a soft determinist or a soft libertarian.
What do you think you are, Matt? What kind of soft are you?
I just soft serve. I don't know.
Sorry, keep going.
Because you have to lean one way or the other and say like this is kind of your emphasis, but you're not saying it's incompatible. And then if you're incompatible, it's going to be a hard determinist, or you're going to be like what's called a process theologian, really. And so going into it, I did not know the breadth of like I thought you were either compatibilist or incompatibilist. I didn't know the breadth of it.
There were other categories,
and so
subcategories.
Yeah, so I would say I can clarify myself as more of this soft determinist compatibilist, but I can understand where everyone else is coming from now. And the more you study it, the more you realize it's like so closely intertwined. I mean, the outliers there's some people that are like, really, atheists are more hard determinists than Christians are, because if you are a true and true evolutionary, like someone who affirms evolutionary biology, you have to say that morality is like our decisions aren't our own, that we make our decisions because of how we evolved.
Okay.
Or like how we were raised. And so you can't say that I'm beheld to my free choice actions, or else you're then denying evolutionary biology. And so like Sam Harris, he's a famous atheist philosopher, is through and through a hard determinist. Christians usually, for the most part, fall under more of a soft determinist to libertarian. And then you have some Christians that are what's called process theologians, which they believe that God isn't immutable, that he changes and adapts to us. Mm-hmm. So the best analogy I can give is like a chess game, or just a game in general. If you say, if I was to tell you, let's play a game, and you agree to it, and I say, you go first, you can't make a move until we've established, well, this is the game. I mean, you can't, we're all just doing random things. There's no game. There has to be parameters on it. And a process theologian would say that humans set the parameters of the game and God adapts to us. Okay. Soft determinist says God sets the parameters of the game and we play the game, and he already kind of knows what we're doing, but he's steering us in our freedom. And so it gives on a spectrum.
I could see how you can go down a pretty long, dark trail of trying to figure that out. Thought comes to mind, what is it, Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah praying for, is that the right story, where he was praying to save the city, and he kept on lowering the number, and God finally,
there's a lot of example. I mean, we can't say scripturally that we don't have freedom, or else why is God punishing us for things that he's doing to us? So like, if morality is false, if we don't have freedom, because there's no moral responsibility.
Right.
And that's the big philosophical question. It's moral responsibility. But because we see scripturally, there's consequence for actions, and there is justification that we need to seek for our sin. It's obvious that God has a high view of our personal liberty. At the same time, you see in Scripture that God is organizing and controlling history for the plan of salvation that he brings. So it works hand in hand, and trying to explain that is the point of this. Yeah. And it's helpful because a lot of people, when they come to faith, they want to understand the relationship that they have with God. So are my decisions free, or is he just guiding everything that I do? And it has to do with prayer too. Like, if he knows what I'm going to pray, or if he knows everything I need, then why do I pray? So there's a lot of practical questions involved. And like you were saying, a lot of this trickles down. Like, I'm not going to teach my dissertation to the church, but what I've learned from my dissertation, I can take concepts of it and help answer questions.
For sure. Yeah. So let's take a little bit of a broader view of higher education, Christian higher education specifically. If anybody has a sense of Christian colleges and different things, you've probably heard of different colleges closing up shop. College, probably even outside of Christian circles, is getting hard. It's getting more expensive. What have you seen in your circles as far as like, what is the hope for Christian higher education, Christian colleges, Bible colleges? Is there no hope? What's being done about it?
So the big number that gets tracked in Bible colleges is the amount of ministry majors, and that's been decreasing. Okay. And so a lot of schools now are putting in new programs that aren't ministry related to offset those lost numbers. But then the other side of that is there's a lot of examples of Bible colleges that have tried to get a big push for enrollment through athletics. And when that happens, they put a lot of money towards athletics, and then it's not maybe 10, 15 years before it kind of collapses. And so there's a tight line that has to be walked for Bible colleges of we're wanting to put people into the ministry pipeline, but because the ministry pipeline is shrinking, we have to add these other courses. and you have to find the right amount of degrees and programs to implement in order to keep the doors open so that you can continue putting people into the ministry pipeline. Yeah. Johnson's done a great job of it, not just because I'm an alumni and a professor there, but I think Johnson has done a great job of not going so far into athletics that something could implode, and not like implementing degrees that aren't going to be kingdom-minded degrees. And they're still bringing a lot of people into the ministry pipeline. But there are other schools that have, collapsed in on themselves because for whatever reason they couldn't sustain it. And a lot of schools now, like Ozark is making a big push in Harding University. They're making this big push to bring education into the churches. And so it's almost like satellite campuses that aren't satellite campuses. You're bringing training and education certificate programs, because a lot of churches are now, because there's not a lot of people going into the ministry pipeline, are hiring from within, so to speak, where they're training someone up and then putting them into a ministry role. But there's a lot of drawbacks in only training someone in-house. And so schools like Ozark and Harding and Johnson starting to do it are providing these online educations that you do at your church, and you might not receive a 4-year degree with it, but you'll get a certificate to show, I've studied church leadership, I've studied Bible and theology, and you get a lot of what you would get on a normal 4-year degree.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those pop up a lot, and it's been really interesting because there's a phrase that we say around here all the time, like, oh, I didn't learn this in school. Like just things you have to do around a church building or different people you interact with. You're like, oh, I wasn't taught how to counsel someone through this certain situation. And so if you can couple that education that we did get with the real life experience of a ministry, and not have to go through some of the prerequisites and then the other classes that maybe are non-ministry classes at Bible college. So you get rid of what you don't necessarily need, but pair that with what you do need.
Things that you would need in order for that school to be accredited and give you a 4-year degree, but you're not necessarily you don't need to know how to, you don't need classes on statistics and analysis if you're just doing ministry. But if you need a 4-year degree, you have to have that. I remember Terry, when I was an intern here, said he would love to go and teach a class at a school on things that schools don't teach you about ministry. And then in my mind, I was like, can you imagine Terry Irwin teaching a college course? How fun that would be. There are certain universities that I would trust more than others, as far as giving a well-rounded theological and biblical education. And university that I'd certainly trust more than getting your education from TikTok or from people that are giving, like, because there are a lot of good people that will give YouTube lessons and stuff like that, but it's hard to sift through what's good and what's bad unless you've been trained to do it. And you have to be trained to do it by people you trust. Right. So, like, some schools that I trust, my master's is from Biola, which is out in California. They have a really good online presence. Ozark's great. Johnson's great. KCU, yes, no. like they're getting, they dropped off for a little bit. Now they're getting stronger again. I feel like. Lincoln Seminary, like you said, like you went to, like there's a lot of good schools that are doing these certificates. Harding, doing a good job with an online presence, but having that background of how to navigate and someone you trust to say, here's how you study, and here's the difference between orthodox teaching and heretical teaching. That's really important. Because there's a lot out there that's false.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that even in the Christian world, people are doing a lot of these things just to make money. It's like, oh, if I could create a training program and they themselves aren't trained or have the right beliefs, but they're doing it because they find this empty space to sell a book or to sell an online training or to sell a certificate. And so that's why I like when you talk about trust, it's like, no, you got an accredited, vetted organization that's been around for years, that is doing it right, that has the technology. God has used technology throughout time to advance his gospel. When it came to, even when Jesus was born, like the system of roads and Roman roads and traveling from different place, to the printing press for when Bibles became
they all came at perfect times too.
Yeah.
Like, and the Reformation happened, the printing press came out right as God moved in the heart of so many reformers to bring about change in the church.
To have the Bible in their languages that the people could read and understand for themselves. And now with the internet,
what change is God trying to use the internet for his church? What
revival might be coming for his people? There are a lot of studies that are alarming that say the churches aren't sending enough people to ministry, that the ministry schools are failing, that they're getting watered down because of these other programs.
Yeah.
But maybe this is the change to, do something that I don't know.
My initial thought is it's a perfect opportunity for churches to get back into discipleship style ministry education, where you're utilizing the educational resources of a trusted institution like Johnson or Ozark, but you're doing the in-house discipleship. And so you're walking through this ministerial biblical education for someone that they can then use it within your church or within their community. So you're discipling them personally and relationally and spiritually, but you're utilizing trusted professors and scholars to give a greater biblical basis. And so my hope is that this is an opportunity for education systems and churches to work hand in hand with one another, like Bible colleges and churches to work hand in hand more clearly.
Yeah. Which, like, the university system can be slow to adapt to some of those things. And so maybe that's some of the changes that are going to be happening.
The church can be slow to adapt to some of those things too.
Well, that's true. That's very true.
So I think finding some symbiosis there is going to be important.
Well, it was a bit of a rousing conversation. I enjoyed it.
We laughed. We learned. We loved. I mean...
What more do you want from us? No, Garrett, thanks for sharing where you are in your journey of education. So before from the start of your work to get a doctorate to the end, what is that timeline going to look like?
About 4 years.
So
I started January 23, and I'll finish probably next summer.
Yeah.
So a little less than 4 years.
So I do have a question, just kind of how a doctorate works. Are you building off of somebody else's, and then will somebody else build off of yours, or are they just standalone?
It depends on. So I'm doing a PhD. You can do what's called a DMin, which is a doctorate of ministry. There's different types, like an MD, a medical doctor. It's going to be different. Not everyone writes a dissertation.
Okay.
A PhD is a researching doctorate. And so that's what I'm doing is research. A doctorate of ministry is more a practical doctorate. So you're going to provide like a big, robust case study of something. So for me, in a researching doctorate, that's the hope, is that someone will use what I've done to do something else. Like you're supposed to utilize other dissertations in your dissertation. But it's not like built around doing that. Gotcha. And every doctorate, like I was accepted into Liberty to do a doctorate with them, but I'm doing my doctorate through Columbia International University instead, because I liked the format of their PhD program better than Liberty, because I already knew what I wanted to write my dissertation on. And so like Liberty is a lot of coursework and then only like 2 semesters of dissertation. So your dissertation's shorter. Columbia I had 3 semesters of coursework and then like 6 semesters of writing my dissertation. So it's all my coursework is built around, like I had to get my dissertation pre-approved before I got accepted into the program. Gotcha. So it's all built differently depending on the school.
So at some point you could be cited in somebody else's
That's
work.
the hope.
Okay.
If I'm not, then I didn't do a good job writing it.
Well, I would think if they would accept it,
yeah. I mean,
it would be
you
good.
have to write up, like for my program, I had to write up a initial like dissertation
like proposal.
Yeah. And so it's a way for them to read, to see how well thought I am and how much research I'd done into it already. But then as you go, like there's a lot, when I look back at that proposal now, I'm like, man, that was a really bad proposal. That wasn't even accurate to what I'm doing now. Like it evolves over time. The more you learn and the more you research, my title's changed like 4 times, and I've quit putting a title with it because I'm sure the final one will be different. So.
As long as you keep quantum mechanics in there, it'll throw people off.
Quantum Leap, right? That was a TV
You're
show.
showing your age a little bit, Matt.
Well, they just came out with it again.
So the idea behind Quantum Leap, and like that's where classical mechanics and quantum mechanics come together.
You started them on something, Matt.
Oh boy,
just because the whole idea of
we were wrapping it up.
I just want to give you the whole idea of like, have you ever watched Interstellar, where you have like the wormholes and the black holes?
Yeah.
That's classical mechanics with gravity bridging with quantum mechanics of what's called like asymmetrical or like being able to go from one point in the universe to another point in the universe by folding gravity and folding space-time and linking 2 things together that are separate.
Okay.
That's quantum mechanics overlapping classical mechanics. Yeah. And that's what a quantum leap would be.
Oh, nice.
We can't prove that you can do that.
Bringing it back, Matt. Good job.
You can't prove that you can do that practically, but you can mathematically.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Hey, if you are still listening, we so appreciate it. Sometimes I think people do just wonder, like, what's going on in personal lives of people. So Garrett goes home and writes all these things, and
we do not.
We do not. Yeah. So, Garrett, thanks again. We really appreciate you sharing with us, and thank you guys for listening and watching and supporting us here at NCC. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to NCC Unplugged. If you've enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to rate and review it and share it with your friends and family. If you are interested in learning more about Norwin Christian Church, visit our website at norwinchristianchurch.com. We also invite you to join us at NCC for one of our 3 services. Sundays at 8:45 and 10:30 a.m. and Thursdays at 7 p.m. We have engaging classes for all ages, ensuring there is something meaningful for everyone in our church community. Thanks once again for listening, and we hope you have a great week.